It is 1/4 past, just to kind of keep on track. It's great, with my great pleasure to welcome Sian Jeffrey to us this afternoon, or this morning still, to talk about creating interactive content using H5P. Thank you, Sian.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. So as you said, then this session is about creating interactive content using H5P. So I'll give you a little bit of background about me. So I work for the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, and we are a new partner for Portsmouth University. So we deliver nutritional therapy degree programs which are validated by the University of Portsmouth. So that's my background. So our students are slightly different to traditional university students. So typically the ION students are mature students. They're quite often fitting in study around other commitments, and quite a lot of them have come to study nutritional therapy because they have their own existing health issues. So that sort of dictates a little bit the pace of study that they have, and their the way that they have to fit study in alongside their other commitments. Often these students are coming after a long time out of study, and also they're not familiar with studying in higher education. So in that way that they're not familiar with studying in higher education, they are similar to traditional university students. So many of the students who are coming are thinking that they would have been attending classes. So again, very similar to traditional university students. What we also notice is that they come with a range of IT competence and confidence. So some are really tech savvy and others not so much so. The great thing about our students is that they do come with a really diverse skill set, although quite often they're lacking in confidence around their ability to complete a degree level program. So that's kind of where we need to be bolstering their confidence to a degree. So really thinking about what it was when I wanted to design online learning using H5P, then, you know, in the context of the students, then I kind of wanted to think about what was my challenge in creating the content that I was going to create. So what I wanted to do was to create something which was going to be an engaging learning experience for students who are new to higher education, and most of them are new to online learning. So that was something really important to me, that they were able to connect with the content and the learning experience, and that they would be able to get, you know, really the most from it. So I had to reimagine what a full day of teaching might look like as an online learning experience. So within ION then, because of the way that our students come to us, most of them are working or have family commitments, then we structured our learning experiences into full weekends of lectures. So that was what they were kind of expecting. And what I wanted to do was to think about how that might translate into an online learning experience. And what I was trying to get away from was delivering a whole day of people sitting at their computer and watching recorded lecture content, because that is not really that engaging. And even if they came to the centre and they did that with us as a lecture day, then there is the extra conversations, there's that social interactions, that feeling of being with people that's really important as part of the learning experience. So I had to think about, how do you recreate something like that in an online environment? Also wanted students to feel my presence as an educator within their learning experience. So I didn't want to just set up something which was recorded and the students just go and watch, and that they're very much just working through it in their own time, and that they don't really feel that they're being steered through it. They don't really feel that there's somebody there with them as part of that learning experience. So that was also something that I wanted to think about. How do I create that for students who are learning online in this way? And then I wanted students to feel that this was a personal learning experience for them. I didn't want them to feel that I put a load of content up for them and they could watch it or not watch it, and that actually it was very impersonal to them. So I wanted to create something which actually engaged them and gave them something to personally think about, and think about how they personally applied the learning experience in the context of their own experience and in the context of what they might want to know. So that was kind of what I consider to be my challenges. So where did I start? So I'm really new to using H5P. I first saw it within the first University of Portsmouth Learning Festival at Andy's presentation about active blended learning, and I saw it as part of that. So this isn't something which I've been doing for years and years. This is something which I've picked up quite quickly. So I hope that's something which is encouraging when we get to sharing what I've actually done, that it's not something I've spent a long time having to learn. So the active blended learning planning tool was really effective for me to help to plan out what it was that I wanted to do within this learning experience. So the things that I considered were, what do I want my learners to learn? And what do I want my learners to do? So that was something which was really important, because I can put up lecture content, I can put up different things, but what is it that I actually want the learners to do with that? You know, how do I want them to apply that to a learning experience? So that was something which I tried to incorporate within what I was doing. And what's the best way to support it? So again, the H5P content, there's lots of different options of things that you can use. So I was trying to think, you know, what's the best activity to put in at this stage to help people really apply the learning and to really get the content squared within their own mind. And the balance as well is, what activities could learners do asynchronously, because it's not possible for me to sit with the learners for an entire day talking them through what it is they're doing in the same way that we might do in a lecture situation. So what I wanted to understand was, what content could they do on their own in their own time, and what was really important for us to do together as a group. So again, that sort of came into how I designed my learning, how I used H5P, and how I threaded that together with synchronous activities. And the part again, how can we be together yet apart? How can I make my presence as an educator felt within the student learning experience? And how could other students make their presence together be felt? Because that learning community is something which is really strong as an underpinning for learning, and something which people can potentially really miss when they learn online. So I wanted to make sure that that was also considered as part of the learning experience which I've designed. And then finally, what, if any, synchronous activities would be available to support the learning? So it's not necessary to always have synchronous activities for students. However, it was important to me because our students expected that synchronous activity, they expected that connection, they expected some live interactive content. So that was something which I wanted to make sure that I had considered within the planning and thought about how I would incorporate that, and to make it something which was really meaningful and help students apply the content which they'd already been working through. So my first attempt was what you can see on the screen now. So this was a day plan. Because our students are quite structured, they like to understand what it is they're going to be doing at particular times. And also with a whole day of learning, then it was important for me to understand roughly the time that they will be spending doing different activities. So I put together this plan, which was directing my learners as to what to do. So it started off with gathering my learners together so that they could ask any questions and I could prepare them for what they were going to be doing as part of the online learning. So that was my starting point. So I presented this day plan to them a couple of days in advance so that they would know what was expected. So within that, then I've got a blend of synchronous and asynchronous activity. So obviously I'm starting them off with some synchronous activity. We're joining together in a live Zoom session, and then they're going off and they're accessing recorded content and coming back together for a live discussion session. So this was how I structured my day, to give that sort of that blend of synchronous, asynchronous activity. And to support the social activity, I also provided an open Zoom room for lunchtime so that students could discuss what they wanted to do there. So that was really what I wanted to give to students up front. And I wanted all of my content to be accessible from one point. So I've given all of the links here. So this was my first attempt, and I thought I'd done a pretty good job. So now thinking about what it looks like on the system. So I want to take you through a tour of what it was that we actually did on the system. So I'm just going to share a different screen now so that you can see what it actually looks like. So hopefully you can see my screen, which is my web page. Can you see that?
You're sharing your notes page.
Okay,
There you go,
can you
yeah.
see my web page now? Okay, great. So, so this is what it actually looked like on the system. So it's quite simple, really. So students, when they come in, when they clicked access their online learning, this is where they came into. So I'd structured my H5P content in this way in these units so that it was easy for students to click on. So they just click on unit 1 as they were directed to in the plan, and it brings them into this this lecture session. So when they start the lecture, they then have these choice of lecture content which comes up. So I've put these together so that they've got all of the lecture content for this particular session in one place. So they can just simply click onto the lecture and it starts the interactive lecture. I'm not going to play it, well, I will play it just a little bit. So what I've done at the beginning is I've given them the ability to download the lecture slides right up front. So within here, then there is a link for them so they can download their lecture slides. Now, our students, they complain that they don't want to use all of their printer ink. So I've set up so that they can download either handouts 6 per page, or they can download full-size lecture slides, depending on how they want to learn. So that's the first activity they can do. So how my video works is that it's interactive, so they play the video at these points which you can see on the screen here, these white dots. These are points of interaction for my students, so they can actually see. So as they play the video, it will play through. So as the video plays, when it hits these points, it stops and it pops up an activity for students to do. So this is kind of about making them feel more engaged with the content, so they're not just passively watching what's going on in H5 in the video, they're actually being given activities to do. So these are interactive points within my video. So what I've done is I've embedded several different points within my video, and you'll have noticed that at the beginning, in the title of the video, then it said it was approximately 20 minutes long, but the video length is actually only 8 minutes long. And that's because within the video, then I've got all of these interactive points which students can do different activities. So I've because I'm new to doing it, I've gone quite simple. I've just given them pop-up things to do, which pop up in here. So that's the first one. Additionally, within my video, I've got the picture of me as well, so that people actually have that feeling of a real person who is delivering the content to them. So that's something which mattered to me, that students could feel my presence within the video. Then moving on to the next interactive point. So before it was a poster that popped up, this one is just another point where students can click on to here, and this takes them to additional content outside of the presentation. So what I've tried to do is to make sure that when my students are learning, that everything that they need for their learning is accessible within the same learning experience. So they're not being directed to go off and find additional things, so close this web page down, go to a different web page. Everything that they need for their learning is contained within this video. So they can click onto the link and it will automatically take them to the folder where those handouts are, so that they can download those and read them. So it's really simple for them to be able to do that, and then they just close it, they click play on the video plays on for a bit longer, and then they come through into their next activity that they can have a look at. So this next one is a pop-up one, so it's some thinking about what they're going to be doing. So again, within here, so I can give them links to the additional content that they should access as part of this section of the video. So it's really simple for them to do. There's some instructions about why the content is important, and then there is an easy access link for them to access that content. So then it continues to play on. So there is lots of different kinds of content that you can have within H5P. So the next one that I decided was to think about what kind of question you can ask them. So you can set them a quick quiz within here. So again, it stops the video, it pops up, so they can click on what it is that might be the right answer, and then click on continue. Only 5% of internal processing is verbally shared. And then the video continues. So once people have completed the activity, it changes from a open circle to a closed one, so it indicates that that's been completed as an activity. The great thing about H5P as well is that you can incorporate external content within it. So one of my learnings has been that I don't need to create all of the content for myself. There are lots of really fantastic open education resources available. And actually what I learned through doing this is that I can change my role from being lecture deliverer to being content curator. So instead of having to put together brand new lectures for all of this subject, then I've actually got access to a whole, like a world's worth of experts who can perhaps deliver some of this content better than I can. And what my role had been in this was to actually find that content and link students to it and help them understand how that was relevant to their learning experience and why they should be accessing that content. So that was something which I've used H5P as a way of facilitating that. Then I can set exercises for my students to do of their own, so relevant to the content which they've just watched. I can set them up with something that I want them to do on their own, so activities for them to do. And then this one here, the final one, is another activity that I've asked students to do. So that's kind of how the H5P, the interactive element, fits. And then again, because I want students to interact with each other, I want to make that really easy for them to do. So I don't want to ask them to post questions on the forum and then sort of leave it up to them to then go and locate the forum within the module page and post their questions, because quite often students, they're going to have questions which pop up exactly now. So they want to ask the question now. So that's why I want to give them access within the content to post questions onto the forum directly here. So that's kind of what it looks like. Then once the student has finished this section, they can click on menu and it comes back to the lecture content. So here they can see what they've got to do. They can see how long approximately it's going to take them. And then they've also got an access point back to the module. So it's really easy for them to navigate around the content which is here. So this one, it follows a similar format. So students have got the same level of interactivity at the beginning. I've got them to download their slides if that's what they want to do. And then embedded within here, there's similar kinds of activities. So again, asking students to read what it is they're doing. What does helping mean to you? Again, linking them to the forum. And then the other thing which I've done is I've embedded activities for students to do. So I've got, this is a larger scale activity for them. So I want them to do something which is either online. A lot of our students, they want to have a printed artifact that they can take away. So I've given them the option here that they can either complete the exercise online or they can download a paper version. So what I want to do now is to show you what the online exercise looks like. So again, it's got a really familiar feel to it because I've got the same kind of background. I've got the description of what it is that they're going to do and the same that they just click and start the exercise. So within this exercise, then I want to give them an introduction of what it is that they are going to be doing. And then to help them, I've got a series of tasks for people to be able to do. So they can choose on task 1. And then it gives them the task brief detail of what it is, and then they can click through onto the next slide. So it gives them the options of what it is that they're asking. It gives them the question here and then a space here to enter their answer. So again, this is all interactive online as students are learning. And then they can move through. So each of these questions, they just click through, and then finally they can export the text. So if they want to have an artifact that they have available to them within their own files, then they have that ability to export that text. So that's where that's where I've got interactive elements. So I've opened up a choice for students to be able to either create something that they want to write on or do something online, depending on how they would like to work. And some of our students, they actually feel that they learn best by pen and paper and actually writing things out. So they have the ability to do that. They can click on the content here and they can download paper version of the same exercise. So you should be able to see that here. So again, the students are able to complete this on paper if that's what they would choose to do. So that's where they're up to. Sorry, I've clicked on moving away from that screen. So that's what I wanted students to be able to do, was that it gave them choices, because that was something that was really important to me, is that students have choices open to them. So that was this is really all I've done, is to think about how I create choices for students. Does anyone have any particular questions about H5P or about what I've done within this at the moment? Okay, I can see. Where does the data go when the student completes an activity such as written reflections? Oh, that's a really good question. And to be honest, I don't know yet, because I haven't completed that. I haven't sort of thought that part of it through. At the moment, it's really for students to use as their own personal learning rather than something which I'm looking at.
I can interject, Sian, on that one from the university side of things. If you make a H5P using the H5P creation inside Moodle, as Sian has done here, because it is integrated into Moodle, it will go into the Moodle gradebook. It'll have its own activity in the gradebook column, and anything they put in, you'll be able to review from there. So, but obviously, where like Sian had the link out to a forum board, that's not H5P. That'll then be in the specific forum board for the module that she's working in as well. So it depends on where you're putting it to. But H5P will, any scores or grades you may sort of have in that, if you're doing a quiz function of H5P, it will store those grades in Moodle. The difference being, if you do a quiz in Moodle, you can kind of lock the attempts. In this, they can come back and do it again. So the grade could essentially fluctuate till they get it right. But I really like what Sian's showing here, of a nice way of kind of structuring learning materials in a kind of a really interactive and sort of useful way.
So, thank you for that. I've learned something as well about the gradebook thing, so that's really helpful. So we haven't been using it for grading students. We've been using it really as just pure learning. So we haven't given, thought that they are going to be doing that as any kind of anything other than their own personal learning, but that is helpful to know. So just to give a bit more around the structure of what we've done. So the students, they can access their content directly from these units, and I've also got a place where they can just download all of the handouts for all of the units in one place. So it's kind of quite clean for them, very easy for them to access that content. The nature of the students that we have is that they want to be able to access stuff inside and outside of the interactive material. So I've given them also within here the raw videos, so that if they want to just watch the videos on their own, they can, and they're organised into a setup for them to be able to do that. Additionally, then there's the exercises. So if they want to complete these exercises outside of the interactive content, then they can do that. They've got access to them there, because you don't have to have them only within the interactive units. You can have them sort of pulled out as separate H5P files. So that's what I've done here as well. So that's kind of how my structure of H5P is. So that's what I've done. So I'm just going to stop sharing this screen now and come back to the presentation screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see the presentation screen again, about what does it look like. Okay, that's good. So I got feedback from the students about whether they liked it or not. The students, this is new for them. To be honest, it's new for me too, but it's new for them. So the things that they said, and the feedback was quite mixed, was that they liked the level of interaction. They said that it was really nice to have an opportunity to discuss learning with other students. Some of the students said that they found that the interaction distracted from the flow of the presentation. So some of them, they wanted to just watch it and they found that actually it was quite distracting. Some of them said they felt a bit pressured to get everything done in time for the live sessions. Other questions were, can I download the content? And what's really nice for me is that they did generally enjoy it. So that's something which is really helpful. So the things that I thought I need to develop for the next time round are streamlining my day plan, because that was, even now for me, it was quite clunky. There was quite a lot of do this, then stop doing that, and then come and do this. So I wanted to try and streamline that. And the feedback that I had from students was that they would appreciate that as well. I spoke to Andy after I'd done it, because the feedback that I got from the students about the interactive elements being really distracting, I found I didn't really know how to get around that, because I thought that adding interaction in was going to be a good thing for the students. And then the feedback that some of the students gave was that they found it distracting. And what Andy suggested to me was that I provide a map of the interactive points within the content, so that, again, students who like the interaction can access the interactive units, but students who prefer to just watch the video straight through would be able to do that, and they would know where the interaction was, so they could come back and look at that another time. So that's something which I developed for the next time that I ran it. And also directing students on how to create their own learning artifacts, because this is different to what they would do in a classroom. So they're not sitting, they're not taking notes in the same way that they would during a lecture. And actually, what I hadn't really appreciated was that with a recorded online lecture, then the speed of it is much faster than in a lecture. And as a person delivering content, I also don't get the same feedback from learners as to whether or not I need to go faster or whether I need to go slower. So what I hadn't really sort of taken on was that students would need to perhaps slow down the speed of play. They might need to stop and pause, write some notes, and then start again. So I hadn't really incorporated that into the way that I'd designed the content. So again, that's something which is learning for me. And what I had underestimated was how long it would take people to fully access the content, as in watch it, do the activities that were part of it, and also make their own notes. And that kind of led to the feedback from that student that the content, that they struggled to get everything done in time for the live sessions, because I probably packed in too much learning into too short a time. But because I was doing it, and obviously I know the content, then for me it was quite quick to present it and quite quick to do those activities. But for people seeing it for the first time, probably not so. And I hadn't really taken account of that within what I'd done. I was also really conscious that students were expecting value for money, and my perception about what value for money was is lots of learning in the time. And actually what I've learned since then is that sometimes less is more, and for an enjoyable and really effective learning experience, that sometimes you need to pare down on the content, and actually it's more about supporting students in how they access it and how they use it and how they integrate that content that is more important. And so what I've thought about for future sessions is to reduce the content within the sessions that are required for the live lecture sessions, and provide a map of core content, which is what is absolutely essential for students to know for tackling their assignment, higher level content, which is that higher level content for students who are aiming for the top end of the marking criteria, who want to extend their learning. And then further than that, extension learning. So going beyond what is really essential for the module, and thinking about how students can actually access content which is at the right level for them, because not all of our students are, first class students. Some of them are, not aiming, but they are pitched at a different level, and that we need to provide an inclusive learning experience for all of them. So it needs to be accessible for everybody. And that's why I think it's important to split out the core, higher and extension tasks so that people can learn at a level which is right for them to create this enjoyable learning experience and not feel that they're failing and have nowhere to go with that, because in an online environment, then that's much more so, because you don't really know you don't really know what other people are up to. So I wanted to make sure that people had a level of connection and a scaling of what it was that they were doing. So this is what I did for the next session, which ran just the weekend just gone. So I had a pared down plan. So you can see from here, I still have the gather in the morning because that was something which students liked. And it was important because what it gave me a chance to do was to pick up any difficulties that students had that were going to affect their learning for the morning. So there were a couple of things like people didn't have their library access, so they couldn't access some of the papers which were going to be part of the learning. So that was something which I could sort out. Well, I couldn't get them library access, but I could make sure they had access to the papers for the day, so it didn't impact on their learning for the day. I also still kept the virtual lunchtime sessions so that it gave students an opportunity to connect together. And then I had an afternoon session, which was a live interactive session, which was all about applying the content that they've been learning in the morning. So again, the synchronous and asynchronous activities were split. And then I split it out again further for the asynchronous activities so that students who perhaps were not able to join for the full afternoon could choose particular sessions that they wanted to join. So if they wanted to just come for the question and answer, they could do that. If they wanted to come for a live workshop, they could do that. Or if they just wanted to catch the wrap up at the end of the day, they could do that. So although it was one synchronous activity, it was split out so that students knew how to access it and what would be covered in each. Additionally, with the plan, then I gave a content plan. So this one is an example of just two of the units, and it's the afternoon ones because the only reason being it just fitted nicely on the page. That's why I've chosen those ones. So I've given them where the interactive points are within the video. So I've given them a timestamp of where that interaction is because I've already got that because I put them together in the video. So it was really easy for me to just go into the video, click on it, see where the timestamp is and put it into a plan for them and give them just some brief details of what's covered. And where I can, I've given links to access that content because then it just really helps students with navigating the content really easily. And then beyond what I did with H5P, then I've also got, I've taken on elements of flipped learning. So thinking about that balance of synchronous and asynchronous, what can students do in their own time and how do we support them to do that? And also giving them some direction on why it matters that they do that they don't just turn up to the live sessions unprepared because, it doesn't make good use of those live sessions. So within creating this more interactive feel for the material really supported a flipped learning approach because students are given quite strong direction on what it is that they should be doing with the content, but it doesn't mean that I have to be there telling them because I'm sort of there in spirit within what I've done in H5P. Another big thing is chunking content because students don't want to necessarily sit and watch a large chunk of content in one go. So if I can break it down into small discrete sections which can be accessed together or independently, then that's really helpful for students. It means that they can pause and they're not missing like a big chunk. They can look at something, think, okay, I'm going to watch 20 minutes of content here and then I'm going to go and do something. So it makes it nice and accessible for them. And also if they want to come back to something, it's really easy for them to find content because it's in smaller chunks. So it means that they're able to come back to something if they want to and think, okay, I only have 20 minutes of content to scroll through to find what I need. So that, and if I want to re-record it, it's easy for me to re-record a chunk rather than a whole big lecture. What I've also seen is that I need to put increased signposting in. So students need to be directed as to what to access, when to access it and how to access it and why. I already mentioned that I very much underestimated how long content would take. So it goes far beyond just the content delivery. So all I did was I thought this will take them 5 minutes to do. That's a video that's 5 minutes. That's another video that's 10 minutes. And I totaled it up and thought, okay, that's a 25-minute learning experience for them. But actually, I didn't include thinking time, which is something that I should do because it makes it more comfortable. Also giving direction on what order for content. So for sometimes it doesn't matter what order students access the content, for other times it really matters. So again, using that H5P grouping enabled me to organize content in a particular order so that students can see the order it should be accessed because of the order it's displayed. So again, it's a nice way of being able to organize content and give signposting and direction in a very easy way. And the H5P also enables us to signpost what students should do with the content. One of the things that I didn't do, and I still haven't done, but I need to think about for future, is giving some students some directions on how to learn online, because this is different for a lot of people. And so when I spoke to Andy and I said, you know, this is the feedback I've got from students, they like it, but they kind of don't absolutely know what to do with it. So he said, well, what did you tell them about what to do with it? And I was like, what do you mean? I gave them the content. That's what I did. They should know. And he's like, well, they don't know. So maybe you should think about giving them some direction of what to do with it. So that's something which is a real learning for me. And I still need to develop that a bit, but definitely I would do that. And I'm thinking about that. I did it a little bit within the live session at the beginning of my next teaching weekend to just give some direction to students, and that seemed to have improved their ability to access the content and their feeling of comfort with online learning. But I think that's something which further development would be useful for. And also, accepting my role is changing. So now, where historically I might have been delivering all of the content, I might have been writing all my lectures and thinking about, you know, how I'll work with students in the classroom, my role has changed now to be content curator and learning guide, really. So I'm guiding students through this content. I'm putting together a learning experience for them to engage with, but I'm not actually there, you know, delivering it to them in the same way. And that's quite a big shift. And also a mindset shift, because there are lots of open education resources available to us. And rather than always feeling we have to create new, then this H5P way of working enables us to draw on those fantastic resources available and to think more about what a learning experience is like for students, because it goes far beyond simply watching lectures and that way of learning. So that's what H5P has really opened my eyes up to, is thinking about how do I use it as a tool for curating a learning experience for students which they can actively engage with and also personalize for themselves. You know, not everybody has to access all of the content, but I want to say to them, this is here for you, that's here for you, you know, have a look here, go there, so that students can really pick and choose what it is that's important to them personally as learning, because I guess that's where my passion is in making learning a very personal experience for learners, whether that's students in formal education or just generally that learning experience. It has to mean something to people. They have to connect to it on a level which is beyond just simply watching content. And that's where I think H5P gives us that opportunity. So I think that pretty much concludes what I wanted to share. So there is some time for questions.
Thank you, Sian. That was very informative, as you'll probably now start to try and catch up with the chat. There's a point, and Andy, you may need to clarify this, because you did that work, and I seem to remember roughly where it was in the presentation, but maybe if you could highlight that to Sian, because then Alexandra followed up to that as well. No. Move on.
Okay.
Andy's not there. I know what I thought, but he.
But yeah, please, Alexandra, please.
It was about the students who perhaps, the ones who were finding it you know, distracting to have the extra interactive stuff instead of just being able to watch a whole video. I guess I can see why not liking the stop-start thing. I get that, because you know you're used to watching a video. So even if it's quite similar to how it would be in the classroom, that you would pause for an activity, I can see why people would find that a little less comfortable. But I don't see why, if they do watch the video and they're not getting the thinking and the watching connected, aren't they just going to miss out on some of the learning?
That was my thought, and I wanted them to watch it in interactive mode. But when I spoke to Andy about it, and that was the discussion we had, because I said, this is the interactive thing, that's the learning experience. The whole of it together is what is useful. But what he said was, but, you know, that's what you think is useful. And, you know, that was a real point for me, because I thought, that's true, that's how I like to learn. So that was why I put together the plan about the content map. So I'll just flick back through. So this content map here, it gives them the points of interaction. So they sort of miss out on it in a way because it's designed to be interactive. But if it doesn't work for them, then that's not positive learning experience for them. So I wanted to make sure that as much as possible, I could make sure that students who don't like learning in that way still had the opportunity to understand how it fitted together, and that they didn't miss that to a large extent. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And I think what I'm slowly coming round to is accepting that it's really not that different anyway, because in the classroom, I like to think that everyone is doing the things and thinking the thoughts and learning the learning. But of course, they might be sitting there thinking, what am I having for tea? You know, I can't control that. I can only make stuff available and as accessible as possible. But if they don't want to do it on the day I'm thinking of it or in the order I'm thinking of it, that's for them to choose, isn't it? And we just have to go with it as best we can.
Yeah. To be honest, I had feedback from somebody else who did long classroom lecture sessions as a student, and they said by halfway through the afternoon that actually they looked around and people were on Waitrose website ordering their shopping, those kind of things. So, you know, it is not that different in a classroom to online, but I guess in online there's even more temptation, because you're literally sitting where things are popping up, and you know it's very easy to get distracted from it, which is partly why I wanted to chunk it into small chunks, because I think if you focus for 20 minutes at a time, half an hour at a time, most people can maintain that focus. So that was kind of one of the things that I wanted to do.
From the H5P angle, from us at the moment, obviously you've built yours around an entire day where you're putting bits in, and like you say, you do some chunking and kind of outside of it learning. Do you use anything else in your live sort of sessions for kind of interactions and things, or is it again purely sort of spoken or
No. So what I've done is I've embedded Padlet into what we've been doing. So I've used that as a group discussion tool. So students have been doing Padlet. Let me just see, I can probably share that with you if I stop sharing this screen and share. Just pull up my... So I'm slowly learning my way around how to share my screens differently each time. So in this one here, so we had a live workshop here and we talked a lot about the client lived experience. So what I've done in this one is we worked together as a group on the Padlet boards. So it's just taking a moment to come up. Yeah, so I'd given them video consultation as part of the morning to look at, and we'd also been given them a set of questions to start to think about, and then our group discussion we moved into Padlet boards. So we used Zoom breakout rooms, and students they facilitated discussion, and we started to work on the Padlet boards. These Padlet boards were then shared with the rest of the group, so each group talked through what they'd done, and then I made the Padlet boards available to all students, so everybody has access to all of the discussion content and they can comment on it and add to it. So that was something that we also used within the live discussion session. I also really like the use of Menti. So I've used that as, just getting a feel for how people are, how you're feeling at the beginning of the day. So I get a feel for that. And then at the end, how do you feel at the end of the day? So I get a feel for whether the learning content was useful or not. So I've kind of used different things to support interactive sessions. And then we've had like live question and answer. So the first part of the synchronous session was question and answer, so that people could ask any questions they had about the content from the morning. We could deal with those, then we could move on to the more applied activity for the afternoon, and then finish it off with some key takeaways from the day. So I've tried to draw in interactive elements at all stages, so whether they're synchronous or asynchronous. And the great thing about Padlet is that you can use it synchronously or asynchronously, so people can add to it if they want to afterwards, which I really like. So students who couldn't come to the interactive session, they could watch the recording of it if they wanted to, the group discussion, and they could also contribute to the Padlet board if they want to. So it gives a lot of flexibility, a lot of opportunity for peer interaction and tutor-student interaction as well.
Fantastic.
Could I just jump in a second? Because I felt my ears burning a little bit through that one. Sian, I think it's just a lovely example of how you've used different technologies for the whole. It's that holistic approach to the right things. But when I saw you the other week, what would we say? It's almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, in terms of you can meet some of them and they're happy and the others are not. And I think, did that planning work? And I think it goes back. I'm not sure if everybody was in the SU session this morning, but the SU session this morning rings home one thing, and it's communication and the clarity around the instructions of what we're actually asking them to do, and don't make the assumption that they will understand what they're actually being asked to do. That came out, I think that was the headline from the SU session this morning. I think that's really important. But you can only do it by dipping your toe in the water, having a go to see if it's working, and then actually ask the students if it's working. So that dialogue is really, really important all the way through the process. Did that mapping work for you, Sian, in the end?
Yeah, it did. So the students that I got feedback from them after the first session, they were really, they gave me really good feedback, really helpful feedback. I could take that. I made the plan for the next week or the next session, and I explained to them, I said, I took your feedback. This is what I've got from it. This is what I've done. How's that for you? And they gave me feedback to say that they liked it. You always get people who are not going to like it, and I still got that. But, generally, I think partly they appreciate the fact that I've heard what they've said and I've tried to adapt it, and their feedbacks were useful. So I'll take what I've got this time and see if I can develop it some more and, go from there. So, it has been helpful.
Fantastic.
Does anyone else have any more questions for Sian? Heda, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. She mentioned very quickly that you had some help with content development. Maybe you can very quickly sort of talk about the assistance you had. From our perspective, obviously you have people like myself and Andy working in the academic and TEL sort of sphere centrally, but I know that lots of people have online course developers within faculty as well. But Sian, from your side of things?
So from our side, we're a small organisation, so we have a we've got a web team who do our Moodle management. So I worked with one of our team to do this. I suppose in a way then I'm fairly comfortable with having a go. So that's what I did. I had a go, and then I spoke to her to make it look more pretty, because what I'd done, it was functional but quite ugly. So she then made it look nicer for students. But then what I could do from that was I could copy it from one session to the next, and then I can just edit what I've done. So the initial setup needed more input from somebody with more sort of design experience. But once it's done, you can copy and replicate things, which is what's really nice about H5P, is that you don't have to always be creating from brand new. You can copy and edit and, you know, chop things around a bit, which is really very time efficient.
Thank you. Yes. And it can be shared between colleagues as well for people to work from a baseline of material. Yeah,
definitely.
Andy's just put, if you haven't seen the chat, that's the most important thing, have a go, which is obviously very true. Sometimes it doesn't matter if it doesn't look pretty. I think people put a lot of stock in it looking beautiful. But actually, a lot of the times, if it's functional to a good understanding level for the student, they like it when it looks nice. But if it doesn't look nice but it works, they appreciate that as well. But if it looks great but doesn't really work very well, they're more kind of like, well, what's the point of this? If they can see value in it, it doesn't always have to look pretty. Although if you can get both, it's perfect.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I went from, was that I thought, this is what I want to be able to do. This is the kinds of things. And, you know, that's why I've got a lot of similar kind of content, you know, a lot of similar kinds of interactions in it, because I don't know how to do them differently yet. But now I know how to do those ones, then I'm going to learn how to do some different ones. So it's an ongoing development. And actually, I feel quite proud of myself that I've got as far as I've got in quite a short time, with actually no formal training. Literally, I came to the learning festival that was earlier on in the summer, saw what people were doing with H5P, liked it, thought, I'm going to give it a go. And that's where I went from, really. So I haven't got lots and lots of training in it. I've got a real passion for supporting learning, and I've got, you know, a real interest in developing online learning. But that's the only special skills I've got in this. I'm not a designer. I'm not, you know, trained in it in any way. So I kind of hope that's encouraging for people to have a go and, you know, just get going with it.
Can I just jump in there? So I just want to say, Sean, I think Deirdre's got it. I was going to write it and say it, but you should be really proud of the stuff that you've done. And I think the whole point of today, and thank you for sharing it, because it is about giving colleagues the confidence to have a go and get stuck in and not be afraid of failure. We did some feedback on the summer festival, and I think 75% of people said that they felt inspired and were confident to get stuck in and have a go. What the concern for us was that 20% of people said, we're not sure. So I think there's still a lot of people out there that are perhaps, the analogy we use at the moment, if I may, is it's like a motorway. There are people that are getting this, they're in the outside lane and they've gone. People in the middle lane that are just, you know, getting on with it, steadily along. The challenge we've got is people in the car park that haven't even got in the car yet and left on the journey. And it's listening to your presentation today, Sean, is about giving people the confidence to have a go and start that journey, and using people, you know, listening to this, using Tom, myself, ActDevTel to just, and it doesn't have to be rocket science. Simple interventions can be really effective. And I think that's what you've really demonstrated today, that you've used the right bit of kit for the right bit against your learning outcomes. And that is the most important thing that I think people perhaps need to take away as well. So thank you. It's been really great.
So great. Well, thank you. I'm really like to be able to share what I've been doing, because I kind of like keep going on, please, someone have a go. So if somebody does, I'm really happy.
The last bit from me, other than to say thank you to Sian for a wonderful presentation, is with H5P in Moodle, like Sian mentioned, she's used one part of H5P and there is a lot in there. Don't let that frighten you. Just have a read through the list. They've designed it very simply, and just pick one thing and just start there. Just get used to one bit and expand. Like Sian said, she found one bit through her reading and through the other developers' help. She came up with her ideas, implemented it, and is now looking to expand that because she's got the confidence. So again, Sian, as Andy said, and everyone in the chat is saying, thank you for a fantastic session.
Your claim.